For those of you who don't know me, does anyone not know me? I'm Cindy Newman. I'm the president of Hadassah at Glen Eagles, Genesis Hadassah of Glen Eagles. This is not specifically a Hadassah event, but we feel and have felt for many years that Yom HaShoah should be recognized at Glen Eagles, so we've done programs for many, many years. Specifically, we're here, but this is not a Hadassah fundraiser or event of any kind. We're really focusing on Yom HaShoah. It's lovely to see so many people here. I welcome you all to this event. Living in the shadow of the Holocaust profoundly impacts individuals and families, shaping their identities and their experiences. The children of Holocaust survivors often grapple with the legacy of trauma. Studies show that growing up in the shadow of such historic events can lead to unique psychological challenges as they inherit the emotional burdens of their parents. I would like to express my appreciation and acknowledge the courage it takes for our panel and everyone who might speak to share deeply personal feelings about growing up as second-generation children. I'd like our panel to come up and light a candle in memory of the 1.5 million children lost in the Holocaust. And I'd like to invite Steve Politsek to come up. Steve is a Holocaust survivor, and light a candle in remembrance of the 6 million who perished in the Holocaust. Thank you so much for representing Holocaust survivor and the children of Holocaust survivors. At this time, I'd like to invite Philip Clapper up to say Kaddish with us all. Everyone should have their votive, and now would be the time for you to light your votive.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I am the son of a Holocaust survivor, so it is quite appropriate, and I just wanted to say that the proudest day of my father's life was when he got to attend the ceremony for my daughter's induction into the Israeli army. Yiskada v'yiskada shemei rabah v'yalma dibrach v'rusei v'yamlif machusei v'chayei chom v'yomei chom v'chayei v'chalvei Yisrael v'agalah v'zakari v'yimru amen Yehei shmei rabah v'borach v'yalam v'nei omaya Yisparach v'yishtabach v'yitzbar v'yizromam v'yizkasei V'yisadar, v'yisalek, v'yisalal, shmei, v'yusha, v'richu. V'elam, v'yikol, v'chasat, v'sharatzat, v'sharatzat, v'nechmasat, da'amiram, v'yamam, v'yimru, amen. Yehei, shlama, rabba, v'yishamaya, v'chayim,
I'd like to introduce Judy. I had said that. Everybody's vote is lit, right? Judy Mendelson, who is of the second generation group, is going to say a few words.
Next Generations was founded in 2004 by Nancy Dershaw with a vision to educate communities and support Holocaust survivors. Over the years, we have raised Holocaust awareness through Palm Beach County by bringing education into classrooms and establishing the Nancy Dershaw Grant to assist survivors facing hardships. We have equipped students with the tools to confront prejudice because we can no longer be bystanders. We must be upstanders. Our mission is to apply the lessons of the Holocaust to today's world, inspiring individuals to stand against bullying, anti-Semitism, and hatred so that history is never repeated. As the second generation, we are the authentic voices of the survivors, committed to preserving their legacy and their memories. Next, in 2021, Next Generations merged with Morse Life to create the Holocaust learning experience. Today, these powerful lessons continue to reach students everywhere, ensuring we remember, take action, and never remain silent.
I did have two microphones. I don't know where the second one went. Oh, you have it. Okay, thank you. So now I'm pleased to introduce you to our panel this evening. We're going to have a panel discussion, and at the end we'll have some time, I hope, depends how late you want to stay here, for a few questions. And I'm sure the panel is happy to stick around and speak with anyone who might have some personal discussions to have. So first I'd like to introduce, I think I'm going to stand, Nancy Dershaw. I'm introducing you. Founder and first president of Next Generations. Simon Wiesenthal, founding member of South Florida Advisory Board. Palm Beach Joint District Holocaust Oversight Task Force. The Dorothy F. Schmidt College of Art and Letters Advisory Board. Morse Life Next Generations HLE, Holocaust Learning Experience Advisory Board. FAU Guterman Holocaust Genocide Center, and FAU Dean's Jewish Leadership Advisory Board. That's quite a. Next is Judy Mendelson. We know Judy. First Vice President of Next Generations, the founder of the Nancy Dershaw Grant for Holocaust Survivors in Need, Morse Life Next Generations Holocaust Learning Experience Advisory Board. And lastly, we have Marion Weiner, member of the Children of Jewish Holocaust Survivors Association since its inception in Philadelphia, and she served on the executive board for 10 years as the secretary. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and they're just going to riff and take the microphone and riff. So, is it on? So, would you please take a moment and tell us your parents' names, where they were born, and where they were during the Holocaust?
Okay, my parents' names were Moshe Mantel, Maurice when he came here, my mother Esther Mantel. Both of them were from Poland. My father was in a shtetl, a small village, Komarov, which was in the Lublin area. My mother as well in the Lublin area in a shtetl called Krylov, which was on the boundaries of the Ukraine. And during the Holocaust, two separate families, they both were in hiding for about 6 months, is kind of what they told me. I'm trying to piece a lot of that together. But what they did tell me was they were hidden by non-Jews that could have been murdered if they were caught hiding them. And while they were hiding, two separate different families, they were captured by the Russians and taken to Siberia labor camps. And that's where they met, and they were there for about 2.5 years.
My father, Wolfgang Hannes, was born in a small town. My father, Wolfgang Hannes, was born in a small town called Görlitz, Germany. It's the furthest eastern city in Germany on the border of Poland. My mother, Ruth Hannes, was born in Berlin. Berlin is also the city where my parents got married. I am a first-generation American, and I have traced my family back in Germany for 7 generations. My parents were married in Berlin, and while they were on their honeymoon, Hitler declared that Jews were no longer citizens. And my father, who was a pessimist, said, we have to leave. And my mother was an only child and would not leave her parents. By the following year, it was really closed off to go anywhere. And finally, my father encouraged my mother to leave, and they were able to get to Buenos Aires. My 2 grandmothers escaped at the, I'm not really sure exactly how, but they escaped Berlin. I have no other extended family. My entire family was murdered in the Holocaust.
First of all, I want to say I am honored to be at this table with these 2 ladies who have been very active and have done some wonderful things. And I appreciate that. I feel like the correlation here. But at the same time, our stories are similar and they're different. We have connection, obviously. My parents were my mother from a small shtetl in Poland, my father from a little bit bigger of a city called Helena, which was made famous through some novels. I'm not sure where they were during the Holocaust, to be honest. The story that I pieced together from growing up is that very similar to Nancy's parents, that they crossed the river from Poland to Russia. The Russians had just left, the Germans were coming in, and at that time they were captured by the Russians and sent to Siberia. So there are many references in those stories my mother told me about Siberia. However, when I finally found some documentation, it took me about 70 years, and I finally found information from the Red Cross of all places. And it says, and those are the documents they gave to the administrators when they went into the displaced person camps, the DP camps. And on those records, it says nothing about Siberia. It says lost in the woods or resistance fighters in the woods for the past 2 or 3 years. And after considering it and talking to my sister, we came to the conclusion that you put down whatever you needed to put down. And if money or reparations or any kind of reward was given because you were in some way injured by the Germans, then you're entitled to something. But if the Russians took you, you obviously weren't entitled to anything that was going on. So I'm assuming that the stories I had as a child were that they spent 2 or 3 years in Siberia, and then slowly were they married, and then slowly made their way back to what they thought was their home.
All right, second question. How did you learn of your parents' past Holocaust experiences? Was it explicit or through other family members? Did your parents discuss their past with you? And remember, you have to hold this up real close.
No, I do know that. No, my mother would never speak about it at all. My father, when we used to get into the car, I would ask him a million questions, and he would say to me, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this, but don't tell mommy. So it was not really spoken about. So I tried to get as much information from my father. What was different than a lot of the second generation, I actually had 2 bubbies and a Zayda who came over, aunts and uncles. I just thought that was normal. And I was very fortunate to have really a big family. My father had 3 other brothers, but 8 of the other children were murdered. And my mother had about 4 siblings who were murdered. That being said, I came down to Florida, met Judy and other second generation, and when they said to me they didn't have family, it was just, I didn't understand that until most of my friends that were 2 second generation did not have any other family. So I would go around to my aunts, my uncles, to try to find out what happened during the Holocaust. But they more or less did not speak about it. They spoke about the time before the Holocaust, the good times, family was the most important thing, the Jewish culture, but not really the catastrophes that really happened to them. So
unlike Nancy and many of my other fellow 2Gs, I grew up with no extended family. And I really didn't recognize that until I got older, and everybody was invited to their grandmothers or their aunts or cousins and for holidays, and we were alone. I have a brother. I was born in Portland, Oregon. I was one of 3 Jewish children in the elementary school. It was a very small German Jewish refugee community. And my father would talk about the Holocaust, my mother not as much. My mother would always stare out the window, and I never asked her what she was thinking. Today, I'm sorry I didn't, but I knew I wouldn't, because that would just bring up terrible memories for her. So I think all of us could say as a young age, we knew what to say and what not to say, and how to behave and how not to behave. No, of course not. So one day, it was going to be Rosh Hashanah, and I told my father, I'm going to go to school. And he said, no, you're not. And my fear was that something was going to happen to our family if everybody knew we were Jewish. And I would sit at the top of the steps, and I could hear them speaking with their little group of German Jewish refugees, and I knew there was something different, and I knew there was something bad had happened to my family. And so as I listened to them, that was about 7 years old is when I really think I got the sense of, wait, there's something really different in my family. My father made me stay home, by the way. He did.
As we transfer to Marion, a show of hands, who in this room grew up in a place where you were one of very few Jews in your school? Yeah, so a bunch of us.
I'm just trying to... Oh, well, I certainly didn't learn from them, because they...
Way up close to you.
I didn't learn from my parents, let's put it that way, because they certainly never discussed it. When we came to Philadelphia in 1950, we lived in an immigrant neighborhood that was changing. And a lot of the people spoke Yiddish, so I was used to the language, and I was used to the customs, etc. So I didn't think anything was unusual, except that my parents had a funny accent when they spoke, and the kids kind of looked at me a little strangely. But I felt fairly comfortable in terms of that. But as I got older, and we moved to more of a middle-class neighborhood, and there was a combination of people, an assortment of different kinds of people. I realized that there's something different about them. And when I turned 8 or 9 or 10, and I started reading Holocaust books, and there were certainly a lot of them, I understood a lot more. I never asked my parents because I didn't know what to ask or how to ask. They never discussed it. If they were with their friends and they were entertaining, which they did very rarely, we were not allowed to be in the room. If they started to say something and we were in the room, they would say, "Shut, Kinder, don't say anything, the children are here." And so it was never kind of an acceptable topic. And there was no way that we could possibly help them heal unless we respected whatever it is that they were. And they certainly didn't want us to know of the horrors that they had gone through. So I didn't know the specifics, I didn't know the details, and to be perfectly honest, I didn't want to know.
As you can see, we've talked a few times, and we are, even though we're all second generations daughters of Holocaust survivors, we all have very, very different stories. But the common thread that goes between us is something very, very unique in my experience. So when I came to Florida and I saw a little blurb in a little newspaper, somebody was looking for other children with survivors. And I didn't really have any friends whose parents were survivors when I was raised, but eventually I was raised in Baltimore. But there was something really unique about meeting other second generation.
I think the common thread that we all have was to protect our parents from any hardships because of what they went through. So I think that the common thread for all the second generation is to protect and to make them proud. However we could, whether it's through education, whether it was keeping a Jewish home, Shabbat.
All right, so that works really well. The next question is, how did your parents' experiences affect your home and family life? For example, how was food treated? How were possessions valued? And were you taught to avoid certain topics and behaviors? We sort of touched on that a little bit.
Well, food, I think back when I was younger, my mother food was very, very important. And I remember my mother in the kitchen making a pot of soup or whatever she was making. We would sit down for dinner. It was my sister who was born in Germany in a DP camp. I was the American born here. We would sit down to dinner and we would have plates of food in front of us except for my mother. And she would turn around and she would say, "Oh, I already ate, I'm full." That being said there wasn't enough food. So she made sure that my sister, myself, and my father had the food. Food was scarce. They came here and with $50, and a 3-year-old couldn't speak the language. So food was the most important thing, and survival.
Oh, there were many secrets in my house. Hiding food in a closet in the basement that had a padlock on it. And I was not allowed to ask what was in there, but I don't remember how I learned what was in there, but I knew it was there. And my one grandmother lived with us until she passed away. I was a teenager. She did a lot of going up and down in the basement and putting things in this locked closet. My mother would always say to me, "You can only sit in one chair at a time. You can only wear one pair of shoes at a time." And this was a only child raised in a very wealthy Berlin family. But the scarcity that she went through brought all of that out. I will say, like many other survivor parents, and maybe you'll agree with me, they wanted me to have a better life. They wanted me to have what they experienced prior to the war. I was never taught to avoid topics and behavior. It was instinctive. I don't know, it was just instinctive. I knew there were things that would go unspoken, right, Nancy?
The only thing I do want to say is someone had asked me, when did I know that we were different, or when did I learn about the Holocaust? And my answer is always the same. The minute I was born, it was in my DNA.
That's true. We learn through osmosis. It just got ingrained as you grew up. Robert's going to say.
How did your parents' experience affect your home and family life? Well, I was just talking to Marion.
Oh, no.
How did it affect her? How was food treated? How were possessions?
I don't remember food being treated that much differently. I just assumed that every Jewish mother made enough for a family that was twice as big or 3 times. And if you had company, you certainly made a lot of food to make sure that no one left hungry or thought they were hungry. So food wasn't the issue. But what I found is when I was younger, they were extremely protective of us. My mother came from a shtetl, which was very superstitious, and everything was based upon what the neighbors thought, and that you were a good child or an obedient daughter, you needed good grades, and you had to be dressed appropriately, and the neighbors shouldn't say anything bad about you. So everything was appearances, because you had to be accepted, because you were the best as far as they were concerned. They wanted to make sure that you had the life that they never had. Okay. And I do remember talking to my sister one time and realized that, yes, they were very protective, but we had a lot more freedom. But we started to become the parents in terms of protection. Suddenly it became much more important for my parents to be able to do things that they wanted to be able to go places. I was afraid that bad things would happen. I was afraid that they would have nightmares. And in all my growing up, I do not remember them ever sitting us down or talking to us and saying anything hateful, anything that was out of color, out of sorts. The only references they made to their life before were little snippets about growing up in a little shtetl. My mother had a cow that she liked and she took care of. She talked about if you walked in the woods with a boy, your reputation was sullied, and that was something that you shouldn't do. So I got a picture of life before a little bit, but I never quite got anything that happened afterwards. She never wanted to discuss it, and since we certainly didn't want to cause them any more pain, we didn't discuss it.
And we'll start with you now. Do you consider yourself a different person because of your second generation experiences?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I grew up a lot more responsible than I would say most American children. I was very busy during my teenage years trying to be an American teenager, and that's all I was interested in at the time. And I would get annoyed at them because they talked funny sometimes. They had this accent. And my friends, were fine with it. They didn't have any problem. But it was very important for me to belong, to be part of our society as it was then. And then as I got a little bit older, I realized what a gift they had given me. They had raised me with high standards and morals and wanted me to be the best that I could be. And they did it with love. There was never mention of hate. There was never mention of obscenities or anything of any kind. And for that, I'm eternally grateful.
I knew I was raised differently than my contemporaries. My parents' values were very different than my friends' parents. And I wasn't really social as a young child. My parents had very strong German accents. My mother didn't shave her legs. That was an embarrassment for me. They really didn't talk very much. My mother was a very silent person. My father was very overprotective and also a very fearful man. He always taught me to look over my shoulders, to be aware of my surroundings, and not to be trusting. And so today, I am an extremely hyper-aware person, aware of my surroundings at all times, and I see things that most people don't see. Sometimes it gets annoying, actually, but it's what he taught me. And I will say that because of his pessimism, it really saved their lives. Because my mother would have stayed in Berlin because her parents weren't going to leave. And my father was so frightened that eventually, I guess, my mother gave in and said, okay, wherever the visas will go. So,
Do I consider myself different? I look back at the way they raised my sister and myself with a lot of triumph and resilience, very positive. They taught us that in America, because you're free, you can do anything you would want to do. You're free to do it. Just make sure you're educated. Always told us to make sure whatever we do, once we are okay, is to pay forward, to make sure that we go out in the community and help others. So do I feel different? I guess they taught us to be humble, our morals, our values, humanity. I don't know, they were wonderful parents, that I can tell you. And yes, does it make me different? I think I'm aware that what they went through makes me a better person.
I've known Nancy for 25 years, and I will say, she and her husband, Barry, are without a doubt, they have 3 amazing children, and I can't remember how many, 4 grandchildren, right? And Nancy is following in the footsteps of her parents as to how they raised her and the values they set for family and how important family was. I didn't have that because I had no extended family, so it was just the 4 of us all the time. So I've always been in awe of Nancy and any of my other friends who had big families and carried that forward. That part of family is what's most important.
Yes. What is the most important message you want to impart to future generations about the Holocaust?
It's a hard question. Need to think about it. And I go to one of my favorite heroes, I should say, the Holocaust, and that's Elie Wiesel. And his famous quote that said, "The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is..."
We can put it closer.
Went off the top of my head just a minute. Thank you. The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. It's complacency. It's where a lot of us are. As simple as that. Our life is good. We're at Glen Eagles. We're enjoying things. But at the same time, it makes me realize that there is a world out there that has changed drastically and at the same time has not changed, which my father always reminded me of. We are not really wanted by anyone. We are not really liked by anyone, meaning other countries, other places. And that seems to be more true today than at any other time. So I guess my message would be, look around you, be careful of what you see, and make sure that in some way you can be part of the solution. And to me that means telling your story, or telling the story of the Holocaust. And every person, as far as I'm concerned, has in some way been affected by the Holocaust. So by telling us this story, or in my case, my story, and by educating, making sure that the school districts have a syllabus that deals with the Holocaust, that every child knows about it. And the third, which always amazed me, is that there are people, especially young people, who don't even know what it means and have no clue what the Holocaust is. And that's very scary. So it's an incumbent upon us to make sure that we get the message across, whichever way we can.
I wrote down a few things. The most important thing is never to forget who you are, never forget the stories, to make sure that we continue to keep our parents' voices alive. We must always speak up against hate, not be a bystander, to make sure that we are upstanders. That is really, really important. And the value of human dignity. very, very important. And to honor family and continuity, that was also embedded. And then I pass forward to my children, and they do the same to their children. So
It's so interesting to hear the different, viewpoints, because we all came from so similar but yet so different. So my message is, take nothing for granted. Do not take your freedom for granted. Always be aware of what's going on around you, and never forget, we must always remember. And every day I wake up and I put my feet on the ground, and I am just reminded how grateful I am for the life I have. And when things have been pretty bad in my life, my mantra has been, if my parents can get through the Holocaust, I can get through this.
that is the common thread that keeps, I think, us going. And through adversity, like I know I do it, and I know that Judy does it, I'm sure Marion does it as well, that if our parents went through what they went through, we could do it, as long as we could do it. And that's what they did teach us, the triumph and the resilience. And so for that, I'm forever grateful for them.
So if there's one takeaway that I could share, it's wear this pin, wear it. And when you're in the grocery store and somebody says, what does that mean? Tell them we're against hate, we're against anti-Semitism. It's okay to be that person. It might feel hard, but I've given you a little piece today, a place to start. Did you have anything else you wanted to say? We're going to open it to questions.
I just wanted to add one other kind of excuse me. I just wanted to add one other thing from my little hero, Ali Wiesel. Not that he's a little hero, but he just was special in my life. And the other thing that he said that comes to mind is that we don't always have the way to undo an injustice, but we always have the power to protest in some way. And when I say protest, what makes me realize is words are what hurt. Words are what gets carried through, and then it becomes something more than a word. It becomes an action, it becomes a hate, it becomes something else. So instead of using it as a weapon, we have to, when we hear words, whether it's a joke or someone makes a reference to a Jewish stereotype or whatever it happens to be, it really annoys me, and I find that I don't always say something. But lately, it's becoming more of a bother than it was before, more serious than it was before. It makes me realize that from that point, it grows and gets bigger. So if someone says something that irritates you or upsets you, say something in a nice way.
I'm going to walk around with a mic, but a couple of years ago, was speaking with friends, Jewish friends, and I'm not going to go into the story, it doesn't really matter what it was, but the word Nazi, oh, she's a blank Nazi, she's a, whatever Nazi. And I didn't say anything because I couldn't think about, at the moment, like what to say. Well, I now know what I'd say, or at least I've thought about it, and I will speak up because it's not funny, and it's not a joke, and it's, those are the kinds of things we can speak up to. Does anyone have any questions? Well, I'm right up here, so I'm going to come to Steve.
So it seems that each of you have had some degree of success and happiness and joy in life. Looking back on your families and your upbringing, did you find joy in childhood? And did you find your parents able to be happy and joyful?
So, thank you for the question, Steve. No, I was not a joyful child. My household wasn't that joyful. There was some unspoken feeling in there, and I can't really put my finger on it, but I know that my mother was always thinking about her, her childhood in Germany, in Berlin, and I'm not sure that my parents were really happy. Again, they came from very, very large families. Both my grandmother and grandfather were one of 8 children on both sides. My mother grew up with extended family, even though she was an only child. Nobody survived. So when she came to America, there she was alone. And it took me a long time, I think, to shed a layer or two to allow myself to become a little more joyful. Oh, now she's going to say something.
I'm thinking about the word joy. The house wasn't joyful, but there was so much love and security. That was the protection, and the family that I did have from Europe. So the joy was there. It was probably a different joy than my American friends, per se. We didn't have the bicycles, the roller skates, going to we didn't have that. We couldn't afford that. So that was materialistic joy, maybe. I don't know. But I did have joy through my upbringing because of the love, the security, and that they took care of us the best way they could.
But did you feel your parents could be joyful?
I don't know if the word joyful. They were happy when they were with their brothers and sisters. I think their hardship of trying to survive and make money for the food, the home, there was a lot of that. But I never found the darkness or, I don't know. I didn't have any kind of darkness or not joy. I thought I was okay.
What I started to say is I feel the same way as Nancy. I don't know if we would call it joyfulness. We were jumping up and down, but the love that was there, the security that was there was certainly overwhelming. But at the same time, I'll just give you one instance. We went to 1 or 2 affairs of friends of my parents from Europe, in New York, etc. And my mother would never get up to dance. And I love to dance, and I would say, why don't you dance with me? And then finally one day she said, I swore when I found out about my sisters and brothers, and she came from a family of 12, and when I say we had no relatives that I know of that survived at all. So we had no relatives in Philadelphia when I was growing up. She said, I told myself that I would never dance again. If God was good to me and gave me a family, that's how I would remember. And at my wedding, she did not dance because she was happy and she was joyous, if you want to call it that, but she would not dance. Luckily, my father did. So I had my dance.
Any other questions?
I was wondering at what point when you started to date and got married to your husbands, did you feel that you had to discuss your family's background and how did they
I could have my husband come up here, which is a whole different story. Did I have to? Well, did I have to? My father would, 11 o'clock was my curfew. He would stand by the storm door in his gatkes and tag top and say, he'd come in, I said to my husband at the time, my parents are from Poland and they're a little different. And my father, Barry, would come in and it was like, okay, so the first date, so what do you think? And he would say, well, what do you mean, what do I think? Like, it was just, the culture was different. Bar? Yes? What I will tell you is that we spoke only Yiddish. up until the age of 5, I only spoke Yiddish. I didn't speak English. And when we started to get serious, he learned Yiddish very quickly because he was afraid they were talking behind his back.
I have to think back, because that husband is long, long, long gone, the first one. But he grew up in a totally American household, and I don't think my parents liked him in the very beginning, but they didn't say anything. There was something underlying that they felt, but didn't say anything, and they were right. And by the time I married my second husband, which was many, many years later, my father was still alive. And yeah, he really liked my husband, Jim. And I would share stories of, my growing up, but it's so different growing up in a house of Holocaust survivors than an American family. It's just so different, and so I can tell you that Barry really assimilated very well. As I say, I've known him very well for a long time, and he's the best. It was different, that was for sure. And again, my parents spoke German. I don't know Yiddish. My mother used to tell me Yiddish was German slang. I know different now, but it's not. I know it's actually a language. And Riva, who was the blonde in the film, is a professor of Yiddish. And she's the only one that I can actually understand because it's so much like the dialect of the German, the Hochdeutsch that my parents spoke. So.
All I can say is my mother was disappointed because he wasn't a doctor. My father was impressed because he had a toolbox with tools.
So like everybody else. All right, I'm going to take another question or two, but I just wanted to announce, because we weren't very clear at the very beginning, we're going to do one more thing with the votives that I gave you before you leave, so hold on to them. And then I will be collecting them at the end of the evening because I will bring them next year, hopefully. So you can just drop them in the box when you leave at the end of the program.
Do any of you have brothers?
I have.
In talking to Holocaust children of survivors, both male and female, there has been a tendency, and I'd like you to address this if you could, that the males were put on a pedestal and don't do anything or say anything for our son to be upset. The daughter was the one that was responsible for the bills, to take care of everything, and to really be like a parent to the Holocaust survivors. Would you talk about that if you've had that experience?
I don't have a brother, but a lot of my friends who have brothers, no, I didn't find that true.
No, it was really the opposite in my household because my brother's 2 years younger than I am, and I was the golden child. My father would do anything for me. He bought me a car when I was 16 years old. My brother was a little bit of a renegade, and he got into a lot of trouble all the time, but it was me that had to get him out of the trouble. And it was that protection. I didn't want my parents to always have to deal with his little shenanigans. And today, we're very different people. We're very, very different. No, I was the one that was on a pedestal.
That's interesting questions, Fred.
Any other questions?
Excuse me one second. I didn't have a brother, but isn't that kind of the old world Jewish way that men were on pedestals and women were not? For some
Okay,
I think that my sister and I got more than we would have gotten had I had a brother.
I have a question for you. Was Judaism practiced in any fashion in your home? Were there rituals? Did you do Shabbat candles? Did you go to synagogue? Did they care if you dated Jewish boys? You know, because one of the issues going forward in today's world is that children don't know who they are. And they say that one of the biggest problems when children get to college is that they have maybe a 13-year-old's understanding of religion, and they don't really understand because it's not an important issue for them. And I'm just curious because, you know, I think the stereotype is that you do practice in, you know, the Holocaust families, but at the same time there's some rebellion against it because it got them into trouble.
In our family, we had Shabbat dinners. It was really, really important, the Jewish culture, to make sure that high holidays, my father didn't work. He went to synagogue on Saturday. He would take my children with him. It was very, very important to still believe in God, to make sure that I married a Jewish man. I also I think I carried that forward with my children as well. My parents were always part of their life. And I see it now with my grandchildren, with both of my daughters who have children. They are doing the same. They keep the Shabbat. They go to the high holidays. They keep that Jewish culture going. I think it's important. And then you cross your fingers.
Well, I was in a different situation. My mother was an atheist. My father, we belonged to a Reformed synagogue in Portland, and then when we got to Baltimore, my mother said I didn't have to go to Sunday school if I didn't want to. My brother was bar mitzvah. But over the years, my father searched for his spirituality his entire life. He started out in a Reformed synagogue. Over the years, Jews for Jesus, my brother and I were like tearing our hair out at times because we weren't sure what was really going on with him. But at the end of his life, he was back with the same Reformed synagogue in Baltimore, who the rabbi was a Holocaust survivor as well. We had holidays, but Shabbat wasn't a big thing. That's how I was raised.
We were raised with all of the Jewish traditions, except that because I was a girl, my father didn't think it was necessary for me to be bat mitzvah. He thought that was an American thing, and didn't exist for him before. So we didn't have to. We didn't have to go to Hebrew school, though my sister did go to Yiddish school.
Okay,
I just wanted to address your original question, really, or premise of it, and I agree with you 100%. The children today, we've done a disservice to our young children. We haven't taught them enough about Judaism. And maybe that may be my generation. Everybody's story is a little different, but my late daughter, she of course knew, her grandparents were survivors. She went to Sunday school, but it wasn't, she really didn't have that much of an interest, actually. And so I think that we have done an injustice to them, and I'm hoping it will change with the next generation.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question.
I just wanted to make a statement. First of all, my experience was very different from all of yours. But every time there was another grandchild born, my mother would say, "I'm happy Hitler is dead, but I wish he were alive to see that we keep it going."
I will tell you, when I first started the organization, Next Generations, my opening statement was, "I am here. Hitler did not win."
I believe that's the name of the movie I was just in. It's called I'm Here. And I think we all feel that way, that Hitler didn't win. And I know I've only lived in Glen Eagles for 3 years. I know very few other second generations.
Show of hands. First generation.
Yeah,
Third, we have a third.
we need to have a group.
So, I know there are probably a lot more questions, but we promised to try to stay to about an hour. We'll remain up here for a while. I'd like to have a round of applause to thank our panelists for sharing. I'd like to thank them for sharing their stories with us.
I am blessed that, thank God, I am. This one? Okay. I was born in the U.S., my mother was born in the U.S., and my father came over from Russia when he was very little. So I didn't experience what these people went through. It was 13 years ago. I said to my husband, we're going to go on March of the Living. Now, I don't know how many people have gone on the March of the Living. How many people with a show of hands? This was one of the most moving experiences that we ever had. When you say never again, well, we marched from Birkenau to Auschwitz with 15,000 people from around the world. Didn't matter. They were Jewish, they were black, Chinese, all races. And they're all saying, Am Yisrael Chai, never again. And I think that was one of the most moving experiences that I ever had. And in Auschwitz, we went, it was in April, and we were told it's going to be very cold. We had 8-9 layers on. We were freezing, and we stopped and we said, how did these people survive? It was like, those that went through them, they did survive. How did anyone survive these conditions? It was like a horror. I think more people should go on March of the Living if they can.
Thank you so much for that. If everyone, I'm gonna, in 1 second, in 4 seconds, have the lights go down, and I think that if you would take your candles out, your votives out, please, and light them again. And I just would like to do a minute of silence in memory of this event, this commemorative Remembrance Day.
And I want to thank everybody for coming. In honor.
Okay, thank you. We can turn the lights back on. Thank you so much. And if, when you go, if you would just put the candles back in the boxes. But thank you all for, you wanted to say something?
Thank everybody for joining us today. It's a very meaningful day for all of us.